The vastness of space lay quiet and cold, yet within the inferno of the Fathroni royal transport's wreckage, heat, pandemonium, and shrieking metal consumed everything. Princess Karaveth found herself immobilized, a massive beam having crushed her lower torso, pinning her to the observation deck floor. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, blood, and the sharp chemical tang of leaking fuel. Crimson warning lights pulsed around her. Distantly, the ship's computer blared a ceaseless repetition. Hull breach detected. Life support failing. Evacuate immediately. Evacuation was impossible. Even breathing was a struggle. Around her, the lifeless forms of her 6 royal guards lay still, the Vafrani Dominion's finest warriors who had sacrificed themselves against the raiders' plasma fire that tore through the vessel. Now they were gone, and she was utterly alone. Kirath, barely 200 years old, was young for her kind. She had persuaded her mother, the Queen, to permit her to journey to the outer colonies without a full military escort, craving adventure and a glimpse of the galaxy beyond the palace walls. She sought to prove herself more than just a princess confined to silken cushions and endless council meetings. Now, her foolishness was bringing her to her demise. The raiders had materialized from nowhere. 6 Doroth Syndicate ships, emerging from behind a dead moon and unleashing fire before anyone could react. Though the royal transport was swift, it was unarmed for combat. They had attempted to flee, but the raiders were swifter still. Kirath's eyes fluttered shut. Her once luminous blue skin had dulled from blood loss. Her forearms hung lifelessly by her sides. She felt herself fading, succumbing to the inevitable darkness. Then, an anomaly, an alien sound, a dull thud against the outer hull, followed by the high-pitched whine of a cutting tool. Someone was attempting to breach the ship. More raiders, she thought, arriving either to finish her off or, worse, to take her alive. The Gora Syndicate was infamous for capturing high-value targets and demanding ransoms. If they discovered her royal status, her suffering would only intensify. She strained to move, to reach for the ceremonial blade still at her hip. But her body refused to obey. She was too frail. All she could do was watch, as a section of the hull glowed orange, then white, before disintegrating completely. A figure stepped through the opening. It was not a Gora raider. It was something she had only ever seen in holograms and trade reports. A human male with brown skin, dark hair streaked with grey at the temples, and a face etched with the lines of age and exposure. He wore a simple patched flight suit, a plasma torch in one hand, and a medical kit in the other. His gaze swept over the shattered observation deck, taking in the carnage and the still bodies, before settling on her. "Hey!" he called out, hurrying towards her. "Hey, can you hear me? Are you alive?" She tried to speak, but only a feeble sound escaped. Okay, you're alive. That's good. That's really good." He knelt beside her, examining the beam that held her captive. "I'm going to get you out of here, all right? My name's Daniel. Daniel Cole. I picked up your distress signal about an hour ago. Took me a while to find you in all this debris." Kirath stared at him, bewildered. The distress signal had been broadcast on all frequencies, but they were in neutral space, far from any major shipping lanes. No one should have been close enough to hear it. "I know what you're thinking," Daniel said, as if reading her thoughts. "What's a human doing out here, right? I run freight between the outer colonies, mostly medical supplies, farming equipment, that kind of thing. Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills." He took out a small device and scanned the beam. "This thing's heavy, but I think I can cut through it. Hold still." He activated the plasma torch and began cutting. Sparks flew, and Kirath felt the heat on her skin, but she did not cry out. The Throne were trained to endure pain silently. "You're tough," Daniel remarked, glancing at her. "Most people would be screaming right now." "What's your name?" she managed to ask. She hesitated. If she revealed her identity as Princess Kirith of the Velrani Dominion, everything would change. He would treat her differently. He might attempt to ransom her himself, or sell information about her whereabouts to the highest bidder. She had long since learned that her title attracted predators. "Kira," she said softly. "Just Kira." "Nice to meet you, Kira. Just hold on a little longer." The beam crashed away. Daniel immediately knelt and lifted her into his arms. His strength surprised her. Humans were generally considered physically weaker than most galactic species, yet he carried her as if she weighed nothing. "My ship's just outside," he announced, moving towards the hull breach. "It's not fancy, but it's got a medical bay and it's not on fire. That's more than this place can say." They traversed through a makeshift airlock he had configured between the two vessels. His ship was indeed far from luxurious, old, battered, smelling of engine grease and recycled air. Nevertheless, its lights were on, the atmosphere was breathable, and there were no bodies strewn about. He gently laid her on a medical bed and promptly began attending to her wounds. He worked with unexpected skill, cleaning cuts, sealing gashes, and setting broken bones. Kirath watched him through half-closed eyes. "You know what you're doing," she murmured. "I was a medic in the military a long time ago," he replied, without looking up. "Before I got tired of war and decided to haul cargo instead." "Turns out it's a useful skill when you're flying solo through the outer territories." "Why did you come?" she asked. "You could have ignored the signal. You could have kept flying. It would have been safer." Daniel paused. He met her gaze, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't anticipated. Not greed, not calculation, not even pity. Just simple, honest concern. "Because someone needed help," he said. "And I was close enough to help, that's all." Kirath was speechless. In her 200 years, she had encountered countless beings, politicians, warriors, merchants, spies, all driven by desire, all with ulterior motives and hidden agendas. This human seemed to possess none of those traits. He had risked his life to save a stranger, simply because it was the right thing to do. She closed her eyes, allowing the medication to pull her into slumber. The last sound she heard was Daniel humming a soft tune as he worked. A simple melody from a world she had never known. For the first time since the attack, she felt secure. 7 years had passed since Daniel Cole rescued Kirath from the burning wreckage of her ship. 7 years since she spent 3 weeks aboard his small cargo freighter, recuperating from her injuries and learning what it meant to be treated as an ordinary person rather than a princess. Those 3 weeks had transformed her in ways she still hadn't fully grasped. Now she sat upon the obsidian throne of the Velrani Dominion, ruler of 47 star systems and over 800 billion souls. Her mother had passed into the eternal void 2 years prior, after a reign of 6,000 years, bestowing the crown upon Kirath, the youngest queen in 3 millennia. The throne room was immense and somber, illuminated solely by the gentle luminescence of bioluminescent crystals that sprouted from the walls. Velrani nobles filled the chamber, their blue skin shimmering in the subdued light, forearms folded in poses of respect and patience. They awaited their queen's pronouncement, but Queen Kirath was not contemplating politics, policies, or the unending demands of governing an empire. She was thinking of a human who had taught her how to play a card game called poker. "Your Majesty," High Priest Varth intoned, stepping forward. He was ancient, even by Volfrani standards, his skin faded to a pale blue, his eyes clouded with age. He had served her mother for 3,000 years, and now served her. The council awaits your decision on the matter of the human request. Kirath forced herself to focus. Remind me of the details. The Human Confederation has sent formal communication requesting a diplomatic meeting. They wish to discuss a mutual defense treaty against the Goras Syndicate. Varth's voice dripped with barely concealed contempt. They believe they can offer us something of value in exchange for our protection. A rustle went through the assembled nobles. Several openly chuckled. Humans, scoffed Lady Thistra, a powerful noble who governed 3 star systems. What could they possibly offer the Velroni Dominion? Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. Their lifespans are so short that their leaders die before they can gain any real wisdom. They are children playing at civilization. More laughter, more nods of agreement echoed through the hall. Kirath remained silent. She let them speak, let them mock, let them flaunt their arrogance for all to witness. This was how her people had always been, ancient, proud, and utterly convinced of their own supremacy. She too had once harbored that certainty, before the attack, before Daniel Cole. She remembered the weeks spent aboard his ship, the dusty horizon. She had been weak and wounded, able only to lie in the medical bay and converse with her rescuer. He had visited her daily, bringing food, tending her bandages, and keeping her company. He had shared stories of Earth, of blue oceans and verdant forests, and cities that glowed at night, of his childhood in a place called Texas, where his father had taught him to repair machines, and his mother had taught him to never abandon people, of the war he had fought, and the friends he had lost, and the decision he had made to forsake violence for a simpler life among the stars. In return, she had opened up to him, not as a royal figure, but as herself. She divulged her fears, her uncertainties, her solitude. How she had grown up in a palace, attended by servants, yet lacked a true companion. She spoke of how everyone in her existence desired something from her, and the weariness of never knowing if someone's kindness was genuine or a strategy for personal gain. Daniel listened without judgment. He posed questions, offered insights, and treated her as an equal, not as a princess, nor an extraterrestrial, but simply as Kira, an individual who had endured a terrible experience and needed someone to confide in. He had also taught her poker. A smile touched her lips at the recollection. Initially, she was dreadful at it, unable to grasp why humans would engage in a game built so heavily on deceit and concealing one's true intentions. Yet, Daniel explained that poker wasn't truly about lying. It was about discerning people, comprehending them, and seeing beyond the facade they presented to the world. Everyone wears a mask, he had said, expertly shuffling the cards. The trick is uncovering what lies beneath. On their final day, upon reaching a Volroni outpost, Kirath made a decision. She couldn't reveal her true identity to Daniel. If he knew he had rescued a princess, the news would spread. The narrative would become politicized. Journalists would probe, officials would investigate, and Daniel's simple act of kindness would be distorted into something else entirely. So, she had quietly departed while he was settling docking fees. She left behind only a delicate crystal pendant, a family heirloom concealed within her attire, and a note expressing gratitude for reminding her that kindness still existed in the vast emptiness. From a distance, she observed him discover the note. She witnessed the confusion on his face, followed by acceptance, and then a small, somber smile as he placed the pendant into his pocket and returned to his vessel. He never sought her out, never attempted to publicize the tale of the alien woman he had rescued. He simply continued his life, transporting cargo between the stars, expecting nothing in return for his benevolent act. Your Majesty. Vor's voice drew her back to the present. Your decision regarding the human request. Kirath surveyed her court, all those seasoned faces so assured of their own importance. They had never encountered a being like Daniel Cole. They had never experienced unconditional kindness. They couldn't conceive that such a thing was even feasible. I will meet with the human delegation, she declared. Silence descended upon the throne room. Your Majesty, Lady Thistra began cautiously. Surely this is unnecessary. We can simply issue a formal refusal through diplomatic channels. There is no need to grant these humans a personal audience. I have made my decision, Kirath stated. Her voice was serene, yet carried the weight of absolute authority. The Human Confederation will be invited to send a delegation to our home world. I will personally hear their proposal. Morath bowed his head. As you command, my queen. When shall we schedule this meeting? As soon as possible. Kirath rose from the throne and descended the steps towards the chamber doors. And Borath, I require comprehensive background information on every member of their delegation. Every member? Is that understood? Of course, Your Majesty. She traversed the palace corridors alone, her guards maintaining a respectful distance. In her private chambers, she opened a concealed drawer and retrieved a small object wrapped in silk. It was a playing card, the Ace of Spades, from a human deck. Daniel had given it to her as a jest on her last night aboard his ship. Keep this, he had said. In poker, the ace can be the highest card or the lowest. It's whatever you need it to be. Kind of like people, I guess. We can always be more than what others expect. Kirath held the card gently in her hands. She wondered where Daniel Cole was now. She wondered if he ever thought about the alien woman he had saved. She wondered if he was still out there, piloting his old ship through the darkness, assisting strangers because it was the right thing to do. Soon, she would have her answers. Soon, everything would change. The human diplomatic cruiser emerged from faster-than-light travel and entered the Vafrani home system. Daniel Cole stood at one of the observation windows, watching as the alien homeworld grew larger in the distance. He had never witnessed anything quite like it. The planet was a deep purple, covered in expansive forests of bioluminescent trees that made the entire surface glow with soft blue and green light. 3 moons orbited it, each adorned with crystalline structures that sparkled like diamonds in the starlight. Beautiful, isn't it? Remarked Ambassador Lisa Monroe, stepping up beside him. She was a woman in her late 60s, with keen grey eyes and silver hair pulled back into a neat bun. She had served as a diplomat for over 40 years, negotiating treaties with a dozen different alien species. Yet, even she seemed captivated by the view. I've seen many planets, Daniel said quietly. This one is truly special. Lisa nodded. The Volfrani have been cultivating their civilization for over 100,000 years. They were traversing between stars when humans were still mastering fire. She paused. That's why this meeting is so crucial, Daniel. They've never considered humans as equals. If we can persuade them to sign this treaty, it will revolutionize everything for our species. Daniel wasn't entirely sure why he was there. He was a cargo hauler, not a diplomat. But when Ambassador Monroe contacted him 3 months prior, asking him to serve as a civilian consultant for the delegation, he found himself unable to decline. You know this region of space better than anyone, she had explained. You've traded with Franny merchants. You grasp their customs. I need someone who can help us avoid errors. So here he was, dressed in a formal suit that felt too snug across the shoulders, preparing to meet the queen of an alien empire. It seemed absurd upon reflection. Daniel Cole, a man who had spent his life striving to avoid attention, was about to enter a royal throne room. The cruiser descended through the atmosphere and landed at a spaceport outside the Vethrani capital city. The city itself was unlike anything human architects had ever conceived. Buildings ascended like living organisms, their surfaces covered in glowing crystals and flowing organic forms. Streets meandered between them like rivers, filled with Vethrani citizens going about their daily lives. The delegation was greeted by a group of royal guards who escorted them through the city towards the palace. Daniel walked at the rear of the group, endeavoring to remain inconspicuous. He was there to observe and advise, not to speak or attract attention to himself. The palace was the grandest structure he had ever seen. It rose from the city's heart like a mountain, its walls crafted from black stone, veined with luminous crystal. Guards stood at every entrance, their forearms grasping ceremonial weapons that Daniel suspected were not merely decorative. They were led through corridor after corridor, each more impressive than the last. Finally, they reached the throne room. The doors opened, and Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. The chamber was immense, capable of accommodating 1,000 people. Vethrani nobles lined both sides of a central aisle, their blue skin softly glowing in the dim light. At the far end of the room, elevated on a platform of black stone, sat the obsidian throne, and upon it sat the queen. She possessed a beauty that Daniel lacked words to describe. Her skin was the deep blue of a twilight sky, marked with lighter patterns that seemed to shift and undulate like living things. She wore ceremonial armor of black metal and glowing crystal, and her forearms were adorned with bracelets of ancient gold. Her eyes were large and luminous, filled with an intelligence that seemed to pierce right through him. The delegation approached the throne and paused at a respectful distance. Ambassador Monroe stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am Ambassador Lisa Monroe of the Human Confederation. We are honored by your willingness to meet with us." The Queen inclined her head slightly. "Ambassador Monroe, your reputation precedes you. I am told you are a skilled negotiator." "I strive to serve my people as best I can, Your Majesty, as do we all." The Queen's eyes swept over the delegation, scrutinizing each member in turn. Daniel tried to remain still, to be imperceptible, but he felt her gaze alight on him like a physical weight. And then she stopped. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply stared at him with an expression that Daniel could not decipher. Was it recognition? Surprise? Something else? "Your Majesty," said an elder standing near the throne, "is something amiss?" The Queen did not reply immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on Daniel, and he felt a peculiar sensation in his chest. Something familiar, something he couldn't quite place. Then he noticed what she was observing. His hand instinctively went to his neck, to the small crystal pendant that hung on a simple chain beneath his collar. He had worn it for 7 years, ever since a Vrani woman named Kira had left it for him on a space station far from this place. He had never discovered its meaning. He had never found anyone who could tell him. It was just a pretty stone that reminded him of a good deed done long ago. A reminder that sometimes helping strangers was its own reward. But the Queen was staring at it as if it were the most crucial object in the universe. "We will recess for the day," she announced suddenly. Her voice was peculiar, tight with emotion she was clearly struggling to control. "The delegation will be escorted to their quarters. We will resume tomorrow morning." A ripple of uncertainty spread among the assembled noblefolk. Ambassador Monroe's initial surprise quickly gave way to composure. "Certainly, Your Majesty," he affirmed. We are grateful for your hospitality. Servants then escorted the delegation from the throne room. As they departed, Daniel glanced back, observing the queen still seated upon her throne, her luminous gaze fixed on him until the doors closed, severing their connection. "What was that all about?" one of the military advisors quietly queried. "I'm unsure," Ambassador Monroe responded, "but I intend to discover the reason." Daniel remained silent, his hand instinctively touching the pendant around his neck, wondering why it suddenly felt so heavy. Sleep eluded him that night. He lay in his quarters, eyes fixed on the ceiling, attempting to decipher the events in the throne room. The Queen's intense gaze, the abrupt conclusion of the audience, it made no sense. No, it was preposterous. The woman he had rescued 7 years prior was merely a traveler, an unfortunate Vethrani caught in a precarious situation. She couldn't possibly be the Queen. Such things only happened in works of fiction. A knock at his door fractured his thoughts. He rose and opened it to find a Vethrani guard in the corridor. "The Queen requests your presence," the guard stated. "Immediately, and alone." Daniel's heart quickened. "Why does she wish to see me?" he inquired. "I do not know," the guard replied. "I only know she specifically asked for you, by name." Daniel paused. "My full name? Daniel Cole of Earth, captain of the freighter Dusty Horizon." Daniel stared in disbelief. How could the Queen know his full name? How did she know his ship? There was only one way to find out. "Lead the way," he commanded. The guard guided Daniel through increasingly private and ornate corridors. They navigated checkpoints where other guards scanned them with unfamiliar devices. They ascended stairs carved from solid crystal and passed beneath arches adorned with symbols that could have been words in a language predating human civilization. Finally, they reached a door crafted from dark wood, inlaid with gold. The guard halted and motioned for Daniel to proceed alone. "The Queen awaits inside," he announced. "You may enter." Daniel hesitated. His instincts, sharpened by decades of survival in hazardous outer territories, warned him that something peculiar was unfolding. Yet he had come too far to retreat. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The Queen's private chambers defied his expectations. He had envisioned something grand and formal, akin to the throne room. Instead, he found a space that felt remarkably comfortable. Soft lighting, plush furniture, shelves brimming with books, and peculiar objects that could have been art or something entirely different. Standing by a window, gazing out at the luminous city below, was the Queen. She had shed her ceremonial armor, now dressed in simple robes of dark blue fabric that accentuated her skin. Without the accoutrements of power, she seemed diminished, more authentic, more like an actual person than a symbol. "Daniel Cole," she said, without turning. "Thank you for coming." "Your Majesty," he bowed awkwardly, uncertain of the proper protocol. "I'm not sure why I'm here. I'm merely a civilian consultant. If this concerns the treaty, Ambassador Monroe is the one you should address." "This is not about the treaty." The Queen turned to face him. "This is about an event that transpired 7 years ago in a region of space far from here." Daniel felt a cold sensation in his stomach. "I don't understand." "I believe you do." She approached him slowly, her luminous eyes never leaving his face. "I believe you have been carrying the answer around your neck all these years." Her hand extended, touching the crystal pendant. Her fingers were cool against his skin, and up close, he detected a scent like flowers and rain, a fragrance that awakened a deeply buried memory. "Kira," he whispered. She smiled, and suddenly he saw it. The same face, older now, and marked by the weight of responsibility, yet undeniably hers. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. The very woman he had rescued from a burning ship and nursed back to health over 3 weeks of shared conversations, card games, and tales of distant worlds. "You recognize me," she stated. "I wasn't sure you would." "Of course I recognize you," Daniel stammered, struggling to process the revelation. "But you're the Queen. You rule 47 star systems. You're not just some traveler attacked by raiders." "I was a princess then, a foolish one, traveling without adequate escort because I longed to experience the galaxy." Kirith stepped back and motioned for him to sit. "Please, we have much to discuss." Daniel sank into one of the cushioned chairs, his mind still reeling. The Queen sat opposite him, and for a moment they simply regarded each other. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked. "All those weeks on my ship, all those conversations, and you never hinted at your true identity." "Would you have treated me the same if you knew?" She tilted her head, studying him. "Or would you have been more circumspect with your words, more formal, more distant? Would you have taught a princess to play poker and recounted stories of fishing with your father in a place called Texas?" Daniel opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. She had a valid point. Had he known she was royalty, everything would have been different. He would have been intimidated. He would have guarded his words. He would have treated her like a princess instead of simply a person. "I wanted to know what it was like," Kirith continued, "to be treated as an equal, to have someone speak to me without ulterior motives. In my entire life, you were the first person who ever bestowed that gift upon me." "It wasn't a gift," Daniel asserted. "It was just normal. That's how people should treat each other." For humans, perhaps. For Valfrani, especially royalty, there is no such thing as normal conversation. Every word is deliberate. Every interaction has purpose. Every relationship is built on obligation and expectation. She paused. "Except with you. You saved my life and requested nothing in return. You shared your food, your stories, and your kindness. And when I departed, you made no attempt to find me, or sell information about me, or exploit what happened for personal gain." "Why would I do any of those things?" "Because that is what everyone else would do." Kirath leaned forward. "Do you comprehend how rare you are, Daniel Cole? In a galaxy teeming with beings who meticulously calculate every action based on potential gain, you simply do what is right because it is right. I have lived over 200 years, and I have never encountered anyone else like you." Daniel was at a loss for words. He had never considered himself exceptional. He was merely a cargo hauler who strived to be decent to others. That wasn't heroic. It was just basic human behavior. But witnessing the Queen's face, the genuine emotion in her eyes, he began to grasp that perhaps it wasn't so basic after all. Perhaps the galaxy was a colder and darker place than he had realized. And perhaps simple kindness was rarer than he wanted to believe. "Why are you telling me this now?" he inquired. "Why bring me here?" "Because tomorrow I will stand before my council and advocate for an alliance with humanity. They will resist. They will argue that humans are primitive, short-lived, unworthy of partnership with the ancient Vanroni dominion." Kirath's voice gained strength. "I need them to comprehend what I learned 7 years ago on your ship. I need them to see that humans possess something precious, something that cannot be measured in technology or military power or lifespan." "And what's that?" "Heart." She reached out and gently touched his hand. You have heart, Daniel. Your entire species possesses it. The willingness to aid strangers, to sacrifice for others, to do what is right, even when it demands a cost. My people have forgotten that such things exist. We have lived so long that we have become cold, calculating, and certain of our own superiority. She rose and walked to the window again. The Gora Syndicate is gaining strength every year. They attacked me 7 years ago, and they have only grown bolder since then. They raid human colonies because they believe humans are weak and unprotected. If we do not stop them together, they will continue to spread and eventually become a threat to everyone, including the Velry. So, this is about politics after all, Daniel remarked. It is about survival, Kirath countered, turning back to him. But it is also about something more. I want my people to transform, Daniel. I want them to remember that strength isn't solely about power, age, and technology. I want them to recognize that a species barely 1,000 years old can impart something vital to the ancient Vlanrani about what it means to truly live. And how exactly are you going to persuade them of that? The Queen smiled, and in that smile, Daniel saw the same woman who had laughed at his terrible jokes, complained about the taste of his emergency rations, and once, after grasping the rules, beaten him at poker 3 times consecutively. I'm going to recount a story, she said. A true story about a human cargo captain who saved a princess and anticipated nothing in return. And then I am going to present them with the proof. She gestured towards his pendant. Might I borrow that tomorrow? I promise to return it. Daniel looked down at the crystal that had hung around his neck for 7 years, the last remnant of a cherished memory, even if he hadn't fully understood it. He reached up, unclasped the chain, and placed it in her 4-fingered hand. Keep it as long as you need, he said. It was yours to begin with. Kirath closed her fingers around the pendant and held it to her chest. Thank you, Daniel Cole, for everything. Daniel stood and moved toward the door. Then he paused and looked back. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad I responded to that distress call. And I'm glad you're making the most of your second chance. That makes it all worthwhile. He departed, leaving the Queen alone in her chambers, holding a small crystal pendant and contemplating the morrow. The throne room teemed with more Velroni than Daniel had ever witnessed collectively. Nobles from all 47 star systems had congregated for this momentous assembly. An undercurrent of tension and hushed conversations permeated the air, and wherever Daniel gazed, he observed faces etched with skepticism and apprehension. Ambassador Monroe stood at the vanguard of the human delegation, her posture erect and self-assured despite the gravity of the moment. Daniel remained at the rear, his preferred position. The doors at the chamber's far end parted, and Queen Kirath entered. She was clad in her full ceremonial armor, black metal adorned with luminous crystals, making her appear legendary. Her 4 arms were posed in a gesture of command, and her radiant eyes swept across the assembled multitude with serene confidence. She ascended to her throne, but did not take her seat. Instead, she stood before it and raised a hand for silence. My people, she began, her voice effortlessly reaching every corner of the vast chamber. We are assembled here to determine the future of the Volroni Dominion. Before us stands a delegation from the Human Confederation, seeking an alliance against the Gora Syndicate. Many of you have already formed your opinions. Many of you believe such an alliance is beneath us. Humans are too primitive and short-lived to be worthy partners. A ripple of assent passed among the nobles. Several nodded overtly. I comprehend your reservations, the Queen continued. I once shared them. I was brought up to believe that the Valfroni were the preeminent civilization in the galaxy, that other species were lesser beings, incapable of matching our wisdom, our might, or our accomplishments. She paused, her gaze settling directly on Daniel. Then I was taught otherwise. The murmuring ceased. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the Queen. 7 years ago, I was traversing neutral space when my vessel was assailed by Gorth raiders. My guards were slain. My ship was obliterated. I was trapped in the wreckage, bleeding and alone, awaiting death. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Few knew the specifics of the incident that had nearly claimed their princess's life. A distress signal was being broadcast, but we were far from any Valrani patrol, far from any hope of rescue, or so I believed. Kirith began descending the steps from her throne, moving slowly down the central aisle of the chamber. Then a ship appeared. A small cargo freighter, ancient and battered, piloted by a single man. He intercepted my signal and came to investigate. When he discovered me perishing in the ruins of my transport, he did not hesitate. He cut through the wreckage, transported me to his medical bay, and spent 3 weeks nurturing me back to health. She halted in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by nobles who had governed star systems since before humans had conceived of writing. That man was human, she stated. His name is Daniel Cole, and he is standing in this room right now. Every head swiveled toward Daniel. He felt his face flush under the intensity of hundreds of gazes, but he compelled himself to remain motionless. Daniel Cole did not know I was a princess, Kirath resumed. I never informed him. I wished to observe how he would treat a stranger, someone with nothing to offer him, someone who could not repay his kindness with wealth, power, or influence. She offered a faint smile. He treated me like a person. He shared his provisions when his supplies were meager. He recounted tales of his home world, taught me games, and listened to my fears and doubts without judgment. And when we finally reached a Vrani outpost, she paused. He requested nothing in return. Nothing. She extracted a crystal pendant from a pouch at her belt. I left him only this, she declared, holding it aloft for all to see. A family heirloom. I hoped he would keep it, and he did. He wore it around his neck for 7 years without comprehending its significance or the identity of its giver. He never sought to find me. He never attempted to profit from his actions. He simply resumed his life, transporting cargo between the stars. Daniel acknowledged that he had aided someone in need. The chamber was utterly silent. My advisors inform me that humans are primitive, Kirath articulated, her voice rising. They cite your brief lifespans, your nascent civilization, your limited technology. They assert you have nothing to offer the Valfrani Dominion. She rotated slowly, meeting the eyes of noble after noble. They are mistaken. The word resonated through the chamber like a clap of thunder. Humans possess something we have lost, something we forgot eons ago, buried beneath centuries of pride, power, and certainty. They have heart. They assist strangers not because it is logical or profitable, but because it is right. They sacrifice for others without calculating what they will gain in return. They confront a galaxy that deems them weak and inferior, and they respond not with dread or submission, but with valor and compassion. She walked back toward the throne, still clutching the pendant. The Goriath Syndicate grows stronger each year. They strike without warning. They kill without mercy. And they care nothing for honor, justice, or the well-being of innocent beings. If we do not stop them, they will continue to proliferate until they menace us all. We cannot vanquish them alone, nor can humanity. But together, United in purpose and resolve, we can obliterate their threat forever. She ascended the steps to the throne and turned to face the crowd one final time. I am not asking you to accept this alliance because it is politically expedient or militarily advantageous. I am asking you to accept it because it is right. Because the man who saved my life deserves to have his people regarded as equals. Because a species that produces souls like Daniel Cole is a species worth fighting alongside. She settled upon the obsidian throne and placed the pendant in her lap. The choice is yours, my people. Will you cling to old pride and ancient prejudice, or will you join me in forging a new future, one where strength is measured not merely in ships and weaponry, but in the essence of one's character? Silence extended through the chamber. Then, slowly, one of the elder nobles stepped forward. He was Lord Vesson, a respected figure who had initially opposed the alliance. He looked at the Queen. He looked at Daniel. And then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he bowed his head. I have existed for 8,000 years, he stated softly. I believed I had witnessed everything the galaxy had to offer. I believed I understood what strength entailed. He raised his eyes to meet the Queen's gaze. I was mistaken. If this human is as your Majesty describes him, then perhaps we have much to learn from his species after all. One by one, other nobles began to incline their heads. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. The resistance that had seemed so resolute dissolved like morning mist. Ambassador Monroe stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. Your Majesty, on behalf of the Human Confederation, I accept your offer of alliance. Together, we will face whatever challenges the future presents. Queen Kirath smiled, and in that smile was the victory of hope over cynicism, of connection over isolation, of heart over cold calculation. Let it be recorded, she pronounced. On this day, the Volfrani Dominion and the Human Confederation are united in a common cause. May our friendship endure until the stars themselves grow cold. The treaty was ratified that afternoon. In the ensuing months and years, the alliance proved more robust than anyone had anticipated. The Gora Syndicate was crushed, trade routes expanded, and for the first time in countless generations, the proud Vlandrani began to perceive other species not as inferiors to be tolerated, but as partners to be respected. Daniel Cole returned to his cargo runs, never comfortable with the renown the Queen's speech had brought him. But he visited the Velroni homeworld regularly, and during those visits, he consistently made time to see an old friend. They would sit in her private chambers, far from the formality of the throne room, and play poker late into the night. She had improved. She was better than him on most days, but he did not mind. It was sufficient to see her laugh, to hear her discuss the trials and triumphs of governing an empire, to know that the kindness he had displayed 7 years prior had helped shape the galaxy's future. You know, he remarked one evening, laying down a losing hand, I never expected any of this when I answered that distress signal. Kirath gathered the cards and began to shuffle. Her 4 hands made the motion impossibly graceful. That is precisely why it mattered, she asserted. You anticipated nothing. You simply did what was right. She dealt a new hand and smiled at him across the table. That is the most human thing I can envision. Daniel picked up his cards and examined them. Another poor hand. But somehow, seated there with the Queen of the Volroni Dominion, he felt like the most fortunate man in the galaxy. Same time next month? He inquired. Same time next month, she concurred. Now play your cards, Daniel Cole, and try not to lose too badly this time." He laughed, and the sound echoed through the ancient halls of the palace, intertwining with her own laughter until they were indistinguishable. Some things, it turned out, were universal. Kindness was one of them.